I am Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to Roleplay Chat.
We are two game masters who can't stop talking about role-playing games.
Today we talk about themes and how they can actually be very useful in your campaign. Or games.
Yeah, and if we can, we're going to try and focus in on the role-playing so that we can get better at it together.
But first, Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing. I just finished my vacation. I'm back at work. Wish I could just be playing role-playing games, but hey, what can you do?
Well, you can do what you've been writing on Discord today to the group. You can try to organize one, right?
Yeah, exactly. I want to play role-playing games, so I think it could be fun. I mean, I want to have a weekend where all the guys play some role-playing games. Obviously, because of COVID, we can't. And actually, someone on Twitter made me very jealous because they posted something saying that, once a year, all of their buddies, they get together, they rent a cottage, and they play role-playing games all weekend. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds so... Like, that's exactly what I want to do. And I know we've kind of talked about it in passing before.
Yeah.
So
I remember you saying you wanted to organize that for my... What was it? Not for my bachelor. What was it?
It was for your baby...
my baby shower.
Your diaper party or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic hit, so we couldn't. So I just want to rip the Band-Aid off. I want to try to do something, even if it's just, a Saturday and a Sunday. Best case scenario, maybe we get it a couple of extra days, maybe like a Friday and a Monday tagged onto there. I don't know, but I just want to play, and I have some time that I have to use. I mean, technically, I don't have to use it right away, but it's like this off the record overtime that I need to kind of use up. So, and anyway, long story short, I want to play role-playing games. We could even rotate game masters. I think that'd be cool.
Yes, the idea of maybe just make it clear. The idea is for us, like our table, to like join together and rotate game master and just have a whole weekend, or like you said, a little bit longer to play. And I love the idea of like alternating being a game master and also being a player and playing in very different games. Maybe like one serious, one goofy, and like that sounds like a cool weekend. But like you said, COVID, and I mean, it's still going to be fun virtually, but I think it's going to give us a taste that we're going to want to replicate once this thing blows over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, being at home doing it isn't the same as actually unplugging and going somewhere where there isn't a crying baby or chores to do, that kind of thing. So anyway.
Yep.
How about you, Chris? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm enjoying my last week of vacation. Well, actually, I worked a little bit this morning, but yeah, Christmas break for me is almost done. I'm a teacher, so semester is about to start. But I'm pretty optimistic about the semester and trying to have a little bit of free time and all this chaos that we live in now. But yeah, I'm doing good. More of the same, and we've actually had a game. I think last week, with you and two other players that I don't usually. It's not the group we usually play with, and it was fun. So I'm looking forward to doing that again.
Yeah, the tone of the game was very different. It was more humoristic, I feel, which was nice. It was kind of nice to have a layback kind of environment where we can crack jokes with our characters, and it feels canon. Yeah,
it was strange for me, and like you and I, when we play role-playing games, like we have fun, we goof around, but it's really like it's not canon, like you said. It's out of the game. It's the players laughing, but the characters are living something that's often tragic, dramatic. But this time, the goal was to make it comedic in the game, and I think we achieved that. It was fun.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that game actually was what inspired me to, I guess, the seed of today's episode, because when I thought of playing in a game where a little bit more humor, maybe different settings, maybe different themes going on. It made me take my energy to Twitter, where I asked the Twitterverse, what kind of themes they had in their games, in their campaigns, whether it be in a Dungeons and Dragons game or any other role-playing game like Call of Cthulhu or what have you. And I got some interesting answers, and that's kind of what brought us here today to talk about themes.
Yeah, and I think we were both surprised to see how. It was different than what we expected, because most people, and when I say most people, I want to say at least 9 out of 10 people, didn't actually answer with themes. Obviously, some people were just goofing around saying, like, my theme is, what was it again? You said, like, my theme was
trying to make people who pay attention to a game that I care the most about, or something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. Well, like, I think people that were answering things like, my theme is, I don't know, we're exploring the ground where an ancient ritual happened, and we're there to save the world. Well, for me, this is something you're working towards. It's an objective, but it doesn't represent the theme. The theme can be various things with this setup. So I think it's interesting to maybe define what we mean by theme, and also see why is it useful. Because at least for me, and I know for you too, themes have been very useful in our own games as game masters.
And before we get too much into this discussion, Chris, we have some exciting news for people, don't we?
Oh my God, people! Next week we have a special guest. We have Brennan Lee Mulligan, great DM for Dropout, for College Humor, Dimension 20, a lot of names. If you know any of those, he's a game master. He is great, very insightful, very funny. We're really looking forward to having him next week.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun because Roleplay Chat is very similar to his podcast. He has a podcast called Adventuring Academy, where he gets celebrities to talk about all kinds of things related to role-playing games. So I'm really excited to have him on our show next week to just do what he does and take a deep dive with us on various role-playing game topics. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be great. And I hope you guys spread the word.
Yeah, let people know, because I think it's going to be a good one. We already have some ideas of what to talk about, but like I said, very insightful guy. So whatever we talk about, I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. And I mean, that's all for the announcement. Let's go back to talking about theme. Let's get ready to get into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I guess for those of you listening, what we're kind of getting at here is it seemed like this idea of having a theme in your game, something that I guess Chris and I took for granted. We expected more people to kind of have that grasp on this concept of a theme, which appears to be something that maybe, like I said, we're taking for granted. So we're going to dive deep on that today. We're going to listen in to our thoughts on what a theme is, how it's different from things like setting and genre and that kind of stuff, and then kind of go into how you can utilize themes to ultimately make the most out of your game, I guess, is what we're going to get at. So let's kick it off then, Chris. Let's kick this conversation off and talk more about what precisely we mean by a theme.
Yeah, and we actually didn't talk about like how we're going to define it. We didn't even look it up. This is just off the cuff. We're just spitballing here. Like, how do we use themes? Like, for me, a theme is something, it's kind of a color I want to give to what's going to happen in the campaign. It's something that I want to see touched every so often during the time frame that theme applies, and we're going to talk about that maybe a little bit later. And it's something that I feel needs to be challenged. So if we're talking about, I'm just going to throw things, talking about friendship, then the friendship needs to be challenged in the story. If the theme is loyalty needs to be challenged. If the theme is violence, then you need to challenge aspects of this theme. Like, I'm just throwing ideas. These are not super complex theme, I guess. But you can make it as complex as you want. So this is what a theme is for me. What is it to you, Matt?
Yeah, I like how you said it's a color or it's like a lens that the game sort of takes on, an angle that the game kind of takes on. Lately in my game mastering, the theme tends to facilitate my thought process because I'm trying to kind of center it around that theme, kind of add that flavor. So like you said, if it's about if the theme is violence, which I've never run a game about a theme of violence, but if the theme is violence, then yeah, there might be excessive violence. The main bad guy, the thing that you're challenging might kind of be the incarnation of that theme in human form or beast form or whatever. And I really think the theme is usually quite a few layers of abstraction away from what's actually going on. It's usually not too descriptive. It's usually kind of vague, kind of ambiguous. I mean, if you think of themes in movies and in media, it's usually like love or romance or I mean, it kind of bleeds into genre a little bit there with romance, but love or friendship or the pursuit of something. These kinds of things can be considered a theme. I actually pulled up a list. Let me go. Listen, the 10 classic movie themes.
Go ahead.
Sacrifice, good versus evil, perseverance, coming of age.
Oh, coming of age. Yeah.
Drama, faith, justice. Those are some of the big themes in Hollywood, I suppose.
Yeah, and we can notice that it doesn't say saving your friend from a possible doom, or it's not associated with a certain action. It's like you said, it's an abstract concept, and I think often one way of putting themes, or like once you have your theme in mind, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, like how to set your theme or whatever, but it's a lot of symbology. It's a lot of foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of background noise, or it's a lot of associating things together. I don't know, if we talk about justice, then you're probably going to go something that is criminal, maybe, and like people getting away with it, and maybe exploring someone who, by maybe the difference between law and justice. That would be a cool theme, and seeing that people, maybe the law does not prevent it, but it's not righteous, or like there's a lot of things you can do with it. And once you have a theme in mind, it's hard to come up with a campaign in a vacuum. If you just start with the theme, it already kind of add constraint that allows you to be creative in that box.
Especially if you already have things like a setting, right? For those of you listening that play with a pre-existing world, you're playing in the Forgotten Realms, or you're playing in Eberron, or what have you, or at Castle Van Strahd, or whatever. Regardless of what your setting is, adding that layer, that theme to the setting can kind of allow you to recycle a setting multiple times. It's like we're saying, it's an added dimension. And maybe, Chris, we could talk a little bit about the difference. I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, what do you feel the difference is between a setting and a theme, or a genre and a theme?
I think let's go with setting and theme. I think a setting is it for me. All of these things just put constraint that allows you to be creative in that thing. So it's different kind of constraint. The setting is a lot about the world, the lore, the people living in it. What like Dragonborn is a D&D thing, but what are Dragonborn in the setting you're running? Are they slave? Are they royalty? Are they whatever? This is the setting. This has nothing to do with the theme. But if, let's say, you say that Dragonborn in your setting is is nobility. Did I say loyalty?
I don't know.
I don't know. Let's say they're nobility, and your theme is not related to nobility, then it doesn't matter. But maybe your theme is the right of noble blood, or I don't know, something of like
nobility or dethroning. Birthright.
Birthrights. then maybe then this part of the setting becomes very relevant. So like you said, it's this focus, it's this lens, it's this color, and then the setting. I mean, they can be very related, like the example I just gave. But if we go back to the theme of friendship, friendship can be done in anything. Like if you're running a Hello Kitty campaign, which I don't think you are, but like your friendship works. If you're running something very gritty, Warhammer, Cthulhu, whatever, you could still pull
friendship.
out,
You could
yeah,
pull out.
pull off,
I guess
pull off,
pull off. Okay.
pull off. Sorry, francophone again. I keep reminding the listeners, French Canadian here. So
pull ups, right? You're changing too many diapers. Is that
yeah, that's another one. But yeah, so you can do that in any game. But a game like let's go with violence. Well, yeah, you can run that at Cthulhu, but maybe not in like the Hello Kitty world, which I don't know if there's a role playing game in that world, but you know what I mean, like something that's very like almost childlike. So I think theme, like you said, is a focus. Setting is a little bit of constraint, but theme gives you kind of a scope of what you're going to explore. And yeah, that's what I'm going to say for now. What about you? Do you want to talk about that or genre? Or
I mean, genre is kind of trickier, I think, because genre tends to be, and I don't have, like I said, I don't have the definitions in front of us, but genre to me tends to be more about the style of game. It's more about, is it all about action, or is it all about, is it all about feeling? Actually, let me think. A genre is more about, like I said, this style, this box that you're trying to fit it into on the onset. Whereas the theme, to me, it plays hand in hand with the genre, but can have its distinctions because the theme is more about the emotion to me, whereas the genre is more about, you know what? I don't know. It's a tricky distinction.
yeah, I think for me, when I think of genre, it's kind of like, how are you going to do things? Like the theme is, for me, is what are you going to explore? What's the question you're going to explore? Almost like philosophy. All those things you mentioned before, it's like the philosophy of this thing. So we're going to challenge this. Genre is like, how are you going to, what is the way you're going to explore maybe that theme? So if we think of cowboy as a genre, or I guess Western would be a genre, it doesn't like, are you exploring criminality, like we said? Are you exploring love, friendship, justice, the price of the wild? I don't even know. Like, but you can do whatever you want within a genre. So I guess genre is for me the how are you going to do things? The theme is the question you're going to ask yourself.
Okay, that's good. That's
good.
You saved me there, Chris. You saved me.
For me, the setting is like the rules. Setting is the rules. This is the truth. If you're running something that's already established, or maybe you do world building, but like this is the truth of the world. The genre is, because you can, like, I'm thinking of, anyway, let's take D&D, because I could do it with Warhammer, but like in D&D, you could have very different genre of games. You could do Monster Hunter, Dungeon Delve, crazy airship balloon exploring the cloud city of whatever. But that doesn't tell you what's the question of your campaign. Question of your campaign is the theme.
Perfect. Good. So I think, hopefully for those of you listening, that clears it up. So theme is very much like Chris is saying. It's this question, it's this flavor that we're adding, that we're going to explore philosophically, whether we're philosophers or not.
We are all philosophers, Matt.
And then I guess another thing that we should add into our definition here, Chris, especially for the rest of the episode, is just to consider what kind of scope we are going to be exploring when we talk about theme. And I think one of the beauties of theme is that it can be as small or as big as you want it to be. And when I say small and big, I mean it can be the theme. You can try to set a theme for your whole world, your whole campaign, the next 5 years of playing. Or you could set a theme for the next 3 games that you're going to be playing, or the next the one shot that you're running can have a theme. So I suppose for those of you listening, when you think of a theme, don't just think of the theme of the campaign, but it can really be broken down into these separate parts, and different themes can be present throughout one narrative.
Yeah. I think one way of seeing it is, I don't know, Harry Potter. I just finished rewatching them. Like, you could see the theme of, I don't know, destiny, prophecy. This I haven't analyzed Harry Potter that much, but like friendship. The whole the friendship is definitely part of it, but all of it is the whole series. But if you look at one book or movie separate from one another, you'll find themes that are only in that book or movie. So it's kind of like a fractal, and that's the way I also see it in my games, where the game we've been playing for 3 years has what I would call a main theme or a running theme, and then I'd like to, every maybe 3 games I have like a story arc. Basically, a story arc should have a theme, because you're asking a question, right? And,
for sure.
And then, like you said, any episode. So I guess we're starting to talk about our personal approach on how we use theme. Well, maybe I'd like to kickstart by asking you: do you always set a theme first, during, after? What's your normal process with theme?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I were to go on average, I usually don't have a theme at first, and the theme kind of gets drawn out as we play. But lately, like I want to say, the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, since we've started this channel, theme has been playing a more pivotal role in my games. I find it really helps me kind of keep railings up to like try to stay focused. So yeah, the theme, at the very least, I come up with something that's kind of very broad. Like in our game that we're playing, our pirate game, I gave myself a theme. To be quite frank, I don't think it actually ever really came to fruition. The theme was going to be freedom and like fighting for freedom, because one of the factions, one of the groups is quote unquote almost enslaved by another group. But it kind of didn't come up, and you guys kind of focused in on other things, so I kind of shifted my priorities a little bit, and I think that's maybe a lesson learned for me. Is maybe not a lesson learned, but something to keep in mind is your theme shouldn't dictate the game. It should just help you in its creation and kind of go from there. But I guess I hope that answers your question, Chris. I'll flip the question back to you. At what part of your creation do themes kind of come into play?
Yeah, for me, I've usually so maybe I'll come back to exactly what I do, but like to address what you said, I think this is the proper way of doing it. It's having an idea at the beginning to start your creation. If you're going for an epic, which I mean like a big campaign with like a main villain and plot reveals and stuff like that. If you're going for an epic, then it makes sense. I think you should think of the theme of this epic to not, like you said, go everywhere, kind of keep it focused. But what will happen often is your players might change it, and you have to be open to changing it. And that's even more important if you're going episodic. If you're going episodic, which means like, you begin with like related one shot and stuff like that, and then when I say you, I guess that's my process. By at the same time that I'm talking about, if I go episodic, I'm not gonna set this overarching theme of like I will probably maybe think of the genre though, and like the setting, of course, and kind of the expectation of, are we monster hunter, are we like, what is driving this episodic thing? But the theme will probably emerge after the 3rd or 4th game, and maybe it's going to change by the 10th one, but I think as a game master, if you're listening to what the players are saying, that's usually when I decide, okay, they are interested in this. Let's ask question. Let's go deeper. That's my theme, and I'll explore it. So that would be my long answer, I guess. Like episodic, I wouldn't start with it, and then and maybe that's why. Maybe it's because you've been running a epic, and before you used to run episodic. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, especially with the one shots, I definitely had an idea of the setting. And for those of you listening, before I set up this epic quest, if you want to call it that, this longer term campaign, it was exactly like Chris said, a series of one shots, probably 3 or 4. They were pretty linear, they were pretty objective based, but in terms of theme, there wasn't a whole lot of philosophy going on in those games. So yeah, the philosophy kind of came out of those one shots. After playing 3 or 4 games, there were things that the players seemed to be more interested in. There was a lot of interest in one particular, I don't want to call it a race, because the Dragonborns, and the way that it felt really like Indiana Jones meets Pirates of the Caribbean, and people like were interested in that. So I was like, okay, what kind of philosophy or question can we look into that will center around that?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I was taking the genre and the things that people were paying more attention to and sussed it out of that, perhaps is one strategy. I guess another question that maybe it's more surface level, Chris, but what kind of themes do you like using? What kind of themes do you like playing with when you run a game?
Yeah, that's interesting. And we talk a lot about like as game masters, but I think for me it bleeds to even when I'm a player. And that's something we joked when I started with in your Rising Tide campaign. I did the most, I don't want to say goofy, but the most like naive, super happy person, because I tend to go very like dark and gloomy and grim. So I figured I would start with a very light character, and I joked and I was like, it's probably going to end up that I'm going to be like, my character is going to self-doubt, and it's going to be like lots of like anxiety, and obviously it happened after like 3 games. But that's my go-to, and it's the themes I go also in my games when I game master, and that's why I run Warhammer, and I like low fantasy. Is the theme of the gray zone, how far are you willing to achieve X. If the theme is like friendship, it's like, are you willing to let go of your friendship for a greater good? It's always going to be like, there's
a lot of sacrifice, I feel.
Sacrifice. Yeah, sacrifice. I think you're right. I think sacrifice is almost like, for me, not a theme because it's a given. And then I put a theme like in my in the campaign. I would define it as destiny and corruption, being the 2 themes I keep coming back to. But You're right. Sacrifice, like corruption and sacrifice, kind of go hand in hand for me, because it's like, how much are you willing to get corrupted to get the job done? Which I guess comes back to sacrifice. So I don't know why, but this is very interesting to me. This dilemma.
Would you say, so it's interesting to you to run as a game master? Would you say it's also something that interests you as a player, or are they different? Like, because from the player's perspective, it's your characters may have themes, but then the themes that they're facing are different, or can be different, I suppose. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think I have less control or less drive when I'm the player, but as soon as I see something that I can be conflicted about, I'm gonna jump into that situation. Like you set up a thing where my family was in the campaign, where clearly my family, and I think you set that up actually for me, like the family being almost opposite of the party's goal, where I had to choose between my new family and my like blood family, like my genetic family. And for me, that's interesting. And if I don't get challenged, I feel like my character is one dimension. And I don't know why I feel like I need this, but it's just so that's why I want to do that to my players, because I feel like by doing this, I get more dimensions of the characters my players are running, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the roleplay piece to all this. For right, we promised roleplay. We're going to deliver on it. If you're adding themes that are relevant to the player characters, it's going to pull new dimensions to them, especially when there's a dichotomy. It may be an interesting thing to explore, and perhaps doing it live on the show isn't the right place to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yes, it is.
But I think perhaps themes... It sounds like themes are interesting when there's two of them. When there's kind of like this combination, family and sacrifice, or fortune, or what do you say? Not fortune, but
justice and criminality.
Justice and criminality, or love and
war.
I don't know. Usually, when there's two of them, there's kind of like this more positive one, maybe that represents the players and the players' perspective, the character's perspective rather, and then the other theme is this obstacle that the two things clash together, and then you kind of put the pieces back together, I suppose.
Yeah, I can definitely see. There's probably other ways to do it, but I think this is one very, I'll say easy, but like simple. Let's go with simple way of doing it. Like for me, like this whole corruption thing and this whole like this dichotomy, I usually try to set up what I can against the players. So if I'm thinking of corruption, I will set it up like the world is trying to corrupt them. Like if we take Ludolf in the first campaign, like the first arc of the campaign, I was setting up the story as if this was the story of a villain, like the origin story of a villain, and this was the character. By the end, if he would have made different choices, he would have become a super powerful demon that would wreck everybody, and obviously at that point, it would become an NPC, but that's the way I set it up. And then the player has to make the choices to go on the light side, to fight back. And this is how I think it's fun with theme to set up to like achieve this drama and this epic story, because they fight adversity. You're not like making them heroes, they're making themselves hero against all odds.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I've already played it, and I want to play it again just because. Cool.
Well, right now I really like how your character, and we're in the personal part, so let's do it. But like your character, okay, let me set it up that way, like that. I think if you do that as a game master, your players will pick up on it, and will like, if they embrace it, they can use it too. Like your character started very following the rules, really schoolboy, following orders, and because you saw that corruption was everywhere and basically bad things were happening to good people because you were limited by your everything that you were taught, then you went and explored maybe a little bit of that corruption, and I think that's a cool story arc, and we'll see what happens. We're not done then.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think leaning into if you're a player listening, or if you're not, game masters, if you want to share this episode with your players, a good and interesting way for you to add dimension to a character, if you don't know how, is to lean into the themes, right? Me in playing your game, Chris, I knew corruption had a very heavy role. I knew magic and corruption had a lot of history imbued in the setting. So I figured, hey, let's do it. This looks interesting. It looks fun. It's clearly a pivotal part of the game, of the themes that we want to explore. I'm going to make it core to my character. I'm going to make this chaos and the corruption, rather. Let's see how much of it can go into him before he really needs to make a decision, which I'm sure is going to happen eventually, or have a decision made for him. I guess.
Well, no, like that's where we talk about player agency. Like for me, my goal is to set up so that, like, if you do things badly, you should end up on the bad side.
Yeah.
But and my goal is to pull you that way slowly, not too intensely, but like slowly, and to see when you draw the line, right? If you do draw the line. Like I talked a lot with my character who did the decision of going on the light side, and I was almost, and that's the problem with that approach. I guess I get disappointed when slightly disappointed, just when the players don't go bad, because I'm like, I thought I gave you enough incentive, and then, like you're just like promising power and promising this big moment of like, and then they choose the right side, and I feel like the corrupting force myself, who's like, I didn't do it like well enough, I guess. Like, but that's usually what happens, I guess.
I suppose. I mean, I think players tend to side on the players we play with, myself included, tend to side on the like the party and the relationships of the party. That is weighed very heavily. It's like, it's very important.
I have a question for you before we. Do you tell your players the themes?
That's a good question. I haven't. I've never. I don't think I've ever done it.
No, maybe you mentioned something about freedom, but I don't. Maybe like to me, because like we talk all the time, and maybe like once, but like it wasn't like.
And I'm not sure you should. Like I don't know
if right?
Yeah, because you don't want to influence. I don't know. I suppose if you have a very clear narrative that you want to get across, and your players are okay, like you have their buy-in to talk about that theme, you could bring it up right out of the gate. Say, look, this is the theme. I want your characters to care about the spectrum of this dichotomy between these things. To take a stance first, and by inserting it into character creation, perhaps there's a way to ensure that theme is relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're going like good and bad, but like you could go order and chaos and turn it in your campaign so that chaos being like the wild, for instance, and order being the law. Maybe the law is used badly and the wild is the good play. Like you could switch it up. Like these could be neutral in the sense of bad and good. So yeah, it's interesting to maybe kind of set it from the get-go and have the players kind of steer you in the direction of where the theme should go. I think there's place for both. I think there's place for the let's build everything around it, even the characters, even like the starting of the game. Or I feel like for me, like the first arc of the campaign, like we called the campaign diary when we used to do it, Blood and Betrayal. Betrayal was a theme I wanted to explore. I'm not going to tell you that at first, because if I tell you betrayal is going to be important, you're going to be like, well, okay, let's like not trust anybody, right?
Yeah, that's true. It could take away. It could give away parts of the game. It could give away some of the big reveals and things like that. I worry about being tied to it.
Yeah.
If you're tying down a theme, like I'm going to use my campaign as an example. Had I tied down right out of the gate, freedom as one of the main themes of the game, I feel like it would have, like you guys would have focused in on it more than you maybe wanted to, and that's not. I don't think that's okay. I think the game still needs to allow for the players to have enough agency, especially in a game where I consider myself to railroad you guys a lot. And for those of you listening, don't freak out because I use the R word. Oh my God, it's terrible. Railroading. Chris and I had a conversation about railroading. You should go listen to it because I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation. Railroading is not necessarily bad as long as player agency lives on. But I would be worried that if I also tell you guys what the themes are that I want to explore, that your agency starts to become dictated by me, which I don't think. I don't know. I haven't thought enough about it, but I don't.
No, but I like what you're saying because I think there's something there. If you're again, like Matt said, go listen to the thing. But like, if you're railroading and you also dictate theme, it might be a little bit too much. But if you're going very sandbox, exploring islands, which at the beginning it was part of your campaign too, but like exploring, and it's a West Marshals game or whatever, to set a theme might actually give it some structure. That the players, and then we go to like maybe talking about a little bit of, let's say, advice, but like kind of like what we've learned, and we've talked about all this episode long of like the way we use it. But I think I like the idea of giving some direction to the players, and if you're really sandboxy, no direction at all, a theme can be useful. Like, I'm thinking of like this freedom thing. If you tell them in advance and then they come across slavers, or they come across I don't know, anything related to freedom, then they might pay more attention, which is going to be the main how do you call that, a thread line, the main
it helps make them focus, right? Because in a sandbox, sometimes players don't know what to focus on. They might come to
a sandbox. Yeah, sorry, I thought
in a sandbox, they might not know what to focus on. They might create characters. Even if you have a session 0 and you're working together to create your party, the characters might be so like unrelated to the theme that they don't jive together. But if you're saying right out of the gate, tell them what your theme is. Tell them that it's about justice and what was it? Justice and order and justice or whatever. Well, now if you almost dictate, if you tell them, hey, each of you, your character should have a component about their thoughts around the justice system in our world or whatever, then it kind of helps siphon them towards the content that you're trying to tell, the narrative that you're trying to tell in this sandbox. And it can come in any order. They can discover it however they want, but at least they're still, they have something, they have a magnifying glass that they can inspect further, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then when something happens, they latch to it, which means they're latching to the right part of your story, I'll say. And you've brought up session 0. I think session 0 is a great time. I mean, you'll have to decide, as we've been doing, like, are you saying that, like, are you setting the theme up from the get-go or not? You could, session 0 is a good time to say it if you're about to say it, but also it's, if you're willing to say it openly, it's a good way to brainstorm with your players. What are they, like, we talk about setting, right? Oh, do you want to play, I don't know.
In Eberron, or do you want to play in... All
of these D&D thing, or do you want to play Warhammer, or do you want to play in the supernatural world, or do you want, like, well, the theme is also important. And if you brainstorm, maybe if you talk about, I don't know, love and war, and your players are like, I don't really want to go romantic or whatever, like, okay, sure, let's talk about the freedom. And people are like, I don't know, can we just do something about I don't know, one of them, the other one,
like chaos or I mean, family drama, whatever. They might. I really like that you're saying this, Chris, because it's true. In many session 0s, I've had conversations about my preferences. Oh, I really like roleplay. Oh, I really like settings that have this and that, or oh, I'm feeling gritty. I want to play something low fantasy, dark and grim and whatever. Like, if that's on the table, why can't the themes also be on the table? And they probably should be, because it is going to educate character creation. If you want to talk about love and everybody's on board to talk about, if there's no love interests or love triangle going on in the party, or you better make one progressively as the game goes on, because otherwise it's not going to be dramatic, right?
And I think it's a great way, theme, actually, to ask the players for campaign input, right? Like we've been saying the other way, like the game master comes and says, here is a theme I'm proposing, and the players say yes or no. But like, it can be the other way. Like, if you haven't decided what and I'm saying session 0, but even if you're running a game right now, it's not too late to like talk to your players and be like, what are the actual theme you want to explore? And another thing we kind of didn't mention is that like the fractal thing of theme being like campaign and episodic or arc. Like I see all my players of having their own theme. It's kind of like their character arc, right? I want to explore. Otis is used to be like a loner, and now he wants to belong somewhere. So he has this all like belonging to a group. He doesn't like it, but he needs it. So there's a theme there. We talked about your characters. I could do that with every character. There's a theme that is only theirs. And if the players come with their player's theme, then you can put that in your world and your campaign in whatever you run to enrich what you're doing. Because we talk a lot about backstory, right? We talk a lot about, oh, I come from this land, blah blah blah. And if you're world building, maybe it helps you create part of your world, which is great. But backstory is backward, right? It's like, how much do you really worry about the past? If you want to go forward, like we talked about motivation, I think theme can be attached to a motivation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or at the very least, it's more forward looking. It's certainly more forward looking than just having a backstory and a background to your character. That's really cool. And I guess the one thing that I might be worried about though is to have themes that are too distinct. I think it works really well in our group because those themes only really started coming out after the party has solidified themselves as a party. Like I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but those themes kind of got developed more when we were given more breathing room after we had gone through a very intense, several months in game, which I think helped our characters bond to one another. And we went through the themes that you wanted to explore with this betrayal, blood and betrayal thing. And then after, that's when our characters started to kind of look forward more, and those themes and our motivations kind of came out. So I suppose I think what I'm saying here is, for those of you listening, I would be maybe a bit cautious, depending on how you want to play your games, to allow players to create their themes in isolation. Like everything else, it's better if you do it together collaboratively so that there's synergies with all of those things. But you also wouldn't want to spoil too many of the surprises. So I guess it's a balancing act.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like we said, even the players might want to keep their themes close to the chest, at least part of it. And that's where I think brainstorming, like if the players say like what they're interested in themes, you get an idea and then you can create without telling them which one you chose, basically. And they're probably going to forget anyway. But they're interested because they told you. Or at least, I mean, it depends. If you forget, I mean, the players don't know what they want, because that's a fact. But like sometimes they can still give you an idea, right? But like something I want to touch on before we finish, I don't know if we're close to finishing, but it's more concretely, how do we use it? I've talked a little bit about, as a game master, I want to challenge it. So for me, and you mentioned that too, like to put challenge forward, like to put it in front of the players, challenging this theme, either the theme of the player, of the character, I should say, or the theme of the arc, or the theme of the campaign, whatever you put in front. That's one thing I like to do. And also for me, the overarching theme, I try to link back into the sub themes. Let's put an example to make it a little bit more clear. One of the section we talk about, like not too long ago, my characters went into a tomb, which was a lot about death and a lot about like being attached to the world by a past life, and the whole, I don't know, there was theme that was to this this tomb, a lot of horror, so a theme attached to that, a lot of corruption again. But at the end, they killed the main bad guy, let's say, or one of the bad guy of the place, and they found out that he was actually being corrupted by someone even more powerful. And I tied back corruption by showing the effect of falling to that corruption to the worst extent, basically, like showing one facet of that. The whole campaign, like the whole story arc of this, reclaiming the past of the ancestors and blah blah blah, is not really related to my main campaign. But the villain was because he felt the corruption. So this helps me make everything make sense. Give some kind of like consistency, I guess. So what do you have to say about that, or what advice, or how do you use theme in your games, man?
Yeah, well, I'll retort a little bit and talk about the things you brought up there, Chris, before talking about how I use themes. But yeah, I like how you're saying you're taking a sub theme, or you're taking a smaller series of games, 2, 3, 4 games, whatever, an arc in your game, and then you kind of bring it back to a central theme. And by, I think one thing that you should give yourself credit for is that your central theme is rather vague. It's rather corruption is pretty encompassing, and I think that's a good thing. I think having a theme, if you're creating a theme, making it have a lot of interpretations and have a lot of ways that it can fit into different environments is very strong. I also think its connection to the setting is also makes it a very powerful theme, because it facilitates your ability to weave it into the game. Right? In Warhammer, there is chaos. It's like part of the lore and the world, that there's these 2 poles that like spew out chaos. There's a moon that's like made out of warpstone, which is basically chaos in the form of a rock. Anyway, like there's just, chaos is part of Warhammer. It's part of the setting.
But you'd be surprised. Sorry, just parentheses. You'd be surprised because I run Warhammer in my brother's game, and corruption has almost no place in it, other than like this setting. It's a lot more political and stuff like that. So again,
I for sure. I'm not saying you're not doing anything. I'm saying the contrary.
Yeah, sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, but like you're really leaning into that element of the setting, which makes it a good theme. So for those of you listening, if you're thinking of, how do I pick my theme? I don't have a theme. I've been playing my same game with my friends for 2.5 years, and I don't know what my theme is. Well, look back to your setting, look back to the things that your players tend to prioritize, and maybe that can be your theme, or at the very least can be the start of the theme, and you can kind of try to abstract it a little bit so that you can use it again and again.
And how do you use it?
How do I use it? So I like to think of the theme, like when I come up with a theme, especially when I was doing it for Rising Tide, like I said, I wanted it to be something that had a lot of interpretations. Freedom, to me, has a lot of interpretations. You are pirates. You're free to do what you want. You have this like sense of adventure, sense of freedom in that definition of the word. But I also liked the idea of freedom to explore its like antonym, or it's the opposite of freedom, which is, I suppose, to have no freedom, to be a slave, or to be tied by something. And I felt like in the game, I tried to introduce, every game that we ran, especially near the beginning, I tried to introduce things that either gave you the choice of freedom. Like I like to think of choice a lot in my games. What kind of choices do my players have in a particular situation? Sometimes binary, sometimes not binary. And I don't know if you remember, Chris, in the very first game, there was an execution, and you guys were allowed to free one of the 2 people, and that choice had an impact on the game, whether you guys realize it. And every time I tried to find ways to insert that theme, whether it be very subtly or not, by giving you guys like a confrontation with it, or a choice to make related to it. Another concrete example was, you guys had your captains. They were all in this meeting, and your way of life, the way I saw it, your way of life as pirates was threatened. That freedom was threatened when the captains were attacked and most of them killed. So I was trying to find ways to. To me, the freedom was like status quo.
Okay.
You guys had freedom, and the others, and that other group, the ones that were enslaved, didn't. So that was like the status quo, and then I wanted to try to explore through different instances, challenging your status quo and giving you guys the opportunity to fight back. And then the same thing for the other ones. These guys are enslaved. Give you guys the opportunities, if you wanted to try and save them. And there were a few instances where you did. There was a boat that you boarded and attacked, and then you set free, and they kind of you kind of recruited them into your pirate gang. So I mean,
it's true. And even like my character, which is tied to his family, you could say that he's trying to get free of his past and his family, and he's trying to prove himself to be part of this free company of pirates, because I feel like I'm still attached somewhere, and I'm stuck with my past. And I think now that you mention it, and I feel like this happens often with theme, where maybe you don't mention it at the beginning, but once you have a decent amount of games under your belt, to mention it to your players might actually be a good thing. I now that I think about it, I'm excited about exploring this more in your game, and having it, I don't want to say dictate, but orient my choices would not be a bad thing. Like, I think I would enjoy this, because maybe I'm already buying in the story, right? We're not at the beginning, we're there, and you're like, look, see how freedom is a theme, and I'm like, oh, that's actually, yeah, you're right. It makes me enjoy it a little bit, I guess, differently. I assume, like movies, like if you analyze movies and you think of the theme and you rewatch something with a different eye, different viewpoint, it might actually give it a different value. So no, I like that. So maybe that's something to consider.
Yeah, it's definitely it could be interesting to bring up to other players and see how they think about it, if they want to allow it to affect their game or not. And I'd be open to either. But in terms of my creative process, I feel like if I compare having a theme now to not having one before, it's definitely easier. It makes my job as a game master a lot easier to consider. Every game you like to think of. I can't speak for everybody, but when I'm planning or preparing a game, I like to think of, okay, what are the challenges going to be? What kind of choices are you guys going to have to make? What kind of environment are you going to be in? Blah, blah, blah. Is there going to be combat, this or that? But if you always add this question to yourself of, okay, but how does freedom, or how does chaos, or how does love factor into this? And it's going to just eliminate like more than half of the things that you could consider,
and allow you to generate ideas too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because like you said, it's going to eliminate some stuff that maybe doesn't fit with what you're going for, but it's going to also, like, the whole idea of like my necromancer being not the bad guy. Like, normally he would be the bad guy of the place, but like being like, no, this guy's a pawn. He's been used. He's been corrupted. This is bad. And my goal was to make it as visceral as possible to show this side. And with my brother's game, where it's a lot about political intrigue, and it's more about like everybody's right, and everybody's wrong at the same time. It's like making your place in a world that is politically unstable, and on the basic. And it's also, I guess, there's a little bit of that freedom and nobility, because the nobility has the power, and people are like, the statu quo is changing to a freebird, like a free city governed by the people that are in that city. And it's okay, what do the players want? And they actually, that's my main thesis, I guess. My main theme is, what are they going to steer the town to? And that's going to be probably what's going to happen if they succeed. So that's the theme. And then like you said, it helps bring everything back to this thing, to this theme, will also allow to steer the ship without railroading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. That sounds really neat. Okay, I think we're going a little bit long.
Yeah.
But is there? I mean, I don't know. Stop me if we've already answered this, Chris. But I wrote down a couple of little questions before, and it was mainly about. I think we answered. So I have a theme. What do I do with it? I think we talked about that.
Well, for me, let's do a recap at the same time as we go through this.
Okay,
So,
sure.
setting up challenges if you're the game master. If you're the players, that's something to keep an eye on to see any time you can actually interact with that theme. And I think something we didn't mention, you can go very shallow, and if you go shallow, maybe it's just going to be the way you narrate stuff. Like the same event could happen if you're narrating what's happening. You can give it different, like, again, it's the lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I think we've talked a lot about how to use themes. Would you have anything else to add that we said?
No, I think let it be part of your creative process. Let it help you create ideas, and that's about it. That's all I have to add to that. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, and I think we might have already answered it. So, but how do I pick a theme? And I say this like, how do you pick a theme, or set a theme, regardless of when you're doing it, beginning, end, ongoing, whatever. And I think we talked a little bit about it. Pick a theme that's vague. Pick a theme that's present, if possible, in your setting or in your environment that you're playing in, and that the players have an interest in. That's, I think, sums it up.
Yeah, and if you're looking for inspiration, there's lists. Like, we could have just list a bunch, which you kind of did at the beginning, but like, there's no tool like the internet to go and see what talks to you and your players, and you're good to go.
Yeah, for sure. And then, do I pick the theme? Do the players pick the theme, or does the theme pick me? Well, I guess it's going to depend on how you want to. It's going to depend entirely on how you're playing. But I really liked how we said, Chris, if you find yourself being a very sandboxy game master with very little direction, maybe bringing forward a theme and picking a theme on behalf of the table is a good approach. Whereas if you're playing the other way around, it's going to be the opposite, right? If you're more railroady and you have a narrative that you're following, maybe allow the theme to be a mystery so that the players can still kind of focus in on whatever they want when they're playing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And sometimes it's your source of inspiration too. Like, often I'm sure you don't even know what you're going to run. You don't even know the characters. You don't even know who your players are going to be. But you're like, I'm interested in, is the good of, like, does the need of one the need of the many more important than the need of one? I don't know what's the saying in English, but like, and you want to just explore that subject. That's your theme. Then you build the whole thing around it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can go find all kinds of philosophy questions, dilemmas, moral dilemmas. That tends to generate interesting conflict and interesting challenges. So you could kind of use that as a starting point. And then I guess something that we didn't talk about, and I'm seeing in our show notes, Chris, and it's talking about modifying the theme. Maybe we want to talk about that briefly before we wrap up.
Well, did you think, for me, modifying the theme was the approach where we talked about adjusting as we go?
That's true.
Depending on what happens, what the player choose, and to be okay with like the theme being malleable and kind of morphing. I'm sure there's other ways to modify. I mean, it's good also to change themes. Like we said, the campaign, to have a main like vague theme, I think is good. But if you're doing, like, for me in my campaign, there's like big story arc, which are basically campaign by their own rights, but they're all linked together in the main epic, I guess. But like each of these campaign, I want to have a different feeling. I want to have a different theme. Like we did the whole blood and betrayal. This is done. I don't want to go back to betrayal. Otherwise, well, It's just players expect
Yeah, it'll kind of get old.
It's going to get repetitive. So that's where theme allows you to be like, okay, this was themed around this. Now it's done. Let's move to something else. But maybe I keep my destiny in corruption because it's very vague, but let's see another facet of it. Like Destiny in the first campaign was Ludolf was destined to become an evildoer.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel like in the second part is you had a vision and you're destined to do something, but is it really your destiny? You saw this in the future. So it's a completely different kind of destiny, but it's still there.
Yeah, and that's that multiple interpretations of the same thing, which is makes it a strong theme. Okay, cool. So I mean, I guess that covers everything we want to talk about. I think we most did the wrap up. So for those of you listening, I hope this was insightful. You sound like you want to say something, Chris.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that for me, it's just encouraging people to think about theme a little bit more, like, because again, if we go back to the Twitter thing, I feel like it's, and maybe you don't, like, maybe you just want to run a game that's just for fun and whatever. But I think even if you think of a silly theme, even if your game is comedic, having a theme can still be, it's not going to be bad. Like, it's definitely just going to add some kind of structure and some kind of consistency. If your goal is to go completely unstructured, maybe you don't need this and just to explore everything. But I think a theme will emerge. And if you think about one at first, you can get a lot out of it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look at like their comedic movies have themes.
Yeah.
Infidelity or brotherhood or love or heartbreak or whatever. Rom-coms have all these things in them, right? And it's because they're interesting. People are captivated by these things. So why not take advantage of like our natural fascination for these kinds of things?
I think a story without a theme will often feel kind of disconnected and kind of it won't feel like it's structured properly, because you don't need necessarily the hero's journey structure or the Dan Harmon structure, or like if you have a theme, especially in a D&D game or a role-playing games where structure is fine but it's hard to follow. I think a theme is a good abstract, malleable, interesting way of setting some kind of consistency in your game.
For sure. And I'm hearing your baby crying, so I think it's time.
Oh, you do? It's the first time? Okay.
It's the first time, yeah.
I think the door always opened upstairs.
Okay. But it sounds like you have to go do daddy duty. Okay, I think, so we can kind of close up the show. So I hope you guys found this episode fascinating. If you have a theme and it's 3 sentences long, I challenge you to rethink your theme and to, try to boil it down to as abstract of a concept as you can, because your game will be better for it. And if you have anything to say against that, come at me on Twitter. That's at roll_play_chat.
Or we have an email. That's contactroleplaychat@gmail.com.
You gotta fuel the fire, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of email, which was like, I mean, people usually agree, but like, oh, at that point, and here's a link that like backs up what you said, or oh, here's a nuance, here's what I would have said, and it's funny to hear. It's interesting, and we welcome it.
Absolutely. So please reach out to us. We love it. We love to be engaged. And if you want more episodes like this, or you have suggestions for things, again, let us know. And lastly, if you're enjoying the podcast, please rate us positively on iTunes or on Spotify or wherever you listen. It goes a long way and it helps the visibility of the podcast. So with that, I think we can close out the show. So I hope that gives you guys some insight on themes. Right, Chris?
Right, Matt.
Let's call it a chat.